So UFC 311 is taking place this weekend and the main event is Islam Makachev versus Arman Tsarukyan 2. And this is a very interesting matchup because I believe Arman is one of the few lightweights. Well, actually I think he's the only lightweight that has a chance against Islam Makachev. So in this video I'm gonna predict and break down this fight. And you guys already know how it goes. Let's go over the strengths and weaknesses of each fighter. So Arman is a fighter with a lot of strengths. He's very well rounded. But he really cemented himself as one of the top tier grapplers of the division in his last fight against Oliveira, where he basically controlled Oliveira on the ground, landed great ground and pound, and survived multiple submission attempts. But the guy also has great takedown defense, which he showed against Makachev in their first fight, but also in this recent Gamrot fight. And on top of that, he has very nasty ground and pound, probably the best ground and pound at lightweight. But besides having amazing grappling, he's also a very good striker. On the feet, the best weapon he has is his kicks, especially his left kick. He whips it out really fast and he has a lot of power on it too. And he also has a very mean spinning back kick as well. But aside from his kicks, he has pretty mediocre boxing skills, but he has fast and powerful hands, and he's also really fast when it comes to closing that distance too. And because he's so well rounded, it's really hard to point out the specific weakness in his game. But one thing I did notice was his fight IQ. I mean, bro was literally wrestling and shooting on Makachev in that fight instead of having a kicking heavy approach, which would have massively favored him. And the corner tried to tell him this in between the rounds. They were telling him to stop wrestling, start kicking more, and the commentators were saying the same thing. They also thought that Arman would have a very kicking heavy approach in that fight. But fair enough, that was his first UFC fight, but this also became relevant again in the Oliveira fight, where Arman basically admitted that after the guillotine attempt from Oliveira, he forgot all about the game plan. And sometimes he also fades away a little the longer the fight goes on. But it's by such a minor amount that it doesn't really matter too much. So Makachev's biggest strength is of course his grappling. He's one of the best grapplers in the UFC, possibly even the best. I think Hamzat is actually a step above him, but regardless, he's a very solid grappler. Now, when it comes to the striking, he's no slouch either. He actually has very good technique. He's very fast, powerful. He has good kicks compared with good boxing, but I would definitely say his kicks are the best part of his striking. And he's also very big for the division and overall very balanced, which is a big reason to why he doesn't have any obvious weaknesses. He does slightly slow down though, and I think that's due to the weight cut. And a consequence of that is that his striking does become sloppier. For example, sometimes when he throws punches, he returns his hands to the hip. But let's go over the win conditions for each fighter, and we'll start with Arman. So I would just advise Arman to keep it standing in this fight, because that's where I think he will have the most success. And I want to see him hammering kicks in this fight, because Makachev is southpaw, and that's going to open up a path for the right body kick. And he's also going to want to mix it up to the head sometimes too. But besides that, he's going to want to utilize his speed by using a lot of blitzes in this fight. Now Makachev on the other hand is going to want to keep his distance and use a lot of long techniques, like straight punches and his teeps, because he has the reach advantage in this fight. Now when Arman attempts to close the distance, Makachev is going to want to put him in that tie clinch in order to neutralize his punches, but also to land those nasty knees. Now Makachev is also a very underrated counter puncher, and I think he will have a lot of opportunities to counter Arman when he's blitzing through the void, as Demetrius Johnson would say. Now when it comes to the grappling, I don't really think he should chase the takedown, because Arman has really good takedown defense, and Makachev really had trouble in their first fight, which was years ago, and Arman has improved a lot since then. So I only think he should go for the takedown if the opportunity really presents itself. Otherwise, it will just be a waste of energy. Now when it comes to these prediction videos, I often say that this is a hard fight to predict, but when I say that this is a really hard fight to predict, I really mean it here. Because they both have such similar styles, you know, they're both good grapplers, good strikers. I mean, I would definitely give Makachev the advantage in the grappling department, but Arman is definitely good enough to hang with Makachev in that department too. I mean, you showed that in their first fight when he was 22 years old and he's 28 now, so that's 6 years to improve at something he's already insanely good at. And I don't think Makachev can submit to Arman, vice versa for Arman, except if he knocks him down first or if Arman is gassed in the later rounds. So in other words, when they're grappling, I think they will cancel each other out. And that means that the deciding factor in this fight is going to be the striking, and when it comes to the striking, it's really hard to say who's better because they're both very different kind of strikers. Makachev is more of a long distance striker with a lot of patience, and Arman is a fast explosive striker who's not afraid to close the distance. And one thing I do think is going to favor Arman in this fight is that it is an open stance fight, so it's going to be easier to land kicks with the back leg. And Makachev does have crispy kicks, but I think Arman's kicks are a lot crispier, and the speed advantage is also going to be big here. Volk showed that blitzes work really well on Makachev, so even though Makachev is a better boxer, he has showed that he has problems with shorter and faster opponents like Volkanovski. But there's also the tie clinch of Makachev, which is one of his biggest weapons, and Arman is a shorter guy, so it's going to be extra effective against him, which is something you have to count in. But Arman is also a really strong dude himself, so he'll have an easier time escaping the tie clinch. And I know what people are going to say. Makachev was standing and banging with Poirier, so on the feet Arman is going to be no problem, but I think a big part of Makachev's striking is the threat of the takedown, which I think is something that a lot of people overlook. I know guys like the Weasel like to say, Makachev's the best striker at lightweight. But I personally think a really big part of Makachev's striking success comes from the fact that people are scared of getting taken down by him, so that's why his striking works so well against people like Poirier. Arman on the other hand won't be scared of getting taken down because he's good enough to scramble and get back to the feet. But at the same time, Arman is shorter, so it's gonna be hard for him to land those kicks, which I think is his specialty. So as I said earlier, it's a really hard fight to predict, but I might be slightly leaning towards Arman here. And listen, I know what you're thinking. Another YouTuber hating on Dagestani fighters. What a surprise. But I actually like Makachev quite a bit. I think he puts on exciting fights, plus he's unintentionally funny. But I really just think this is such a close fight. I think that regardless of who wins, this fight is going to end in a close decision. I think Arman is going to have success in the early rounds, and eventually Makachev is going to get used to the speed and take over in the later rounds. But man, I just think there are a lot of factors that work in Arman's favor here. I think it's the speed advantage, the fact that he has better kicks, the fact that the takedown threat won't affect him as much, and the fact that they fought once before when Arman was a baby essentially in his career, 22 years old. Makachev had a lot more experience over him, and he still made it very competitive. And I know what you're thinking, Makachev has improved as well. And yeah, that's very obvious, he's developed a very good striking game, but Arman was 22 years old back then. And Makachev was his first fight in the UFC, while Makachev had already had multiple fights in the UFC. So naturally I think Arman should have improved more than Makachev since their first fight, because he was so young back then. And I also want to bring up the fact that Arman was able to hold down Oliveira and rain down ground and pound on him, which is really hard to do because Oliveira is such an offensive guard. As soon as you push up against him, he's already locking up a submission. And Makachev is certainly not as good off his back as Oliveira is. We know that because of the first fight with Volk, where Volk was raining down ground and pound on Makachev at the end of the 5th round. So if Arman somehow gets Makachev's back to the canvas, which is extremely hard to do by the way, Makachev's gonna be in a lot of trouble. So I will be going with Arman here, probably by 48-47 decision. And I could see the Weasel having to make a Who Really Won video right after, because it's gonna be such a close fight. But that said, check out the video I did about the best trash talkers in the UFC. But anyways, thanks for watching, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Am I just an Arman Glazer or was I spitting facts? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And also don't forget to share this video to an Islam Makachev fan, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.